This is deliveranceministry.fm VideoCast number 74. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of deliveranceministry.fm, where we give you proven insights about the demonic realm and deliverance ministry, and even some Christian counseling topics, so that you can wage spiritual warfare more effectively. Once again, this is Dr. Don Ibbotson behind the mic here in our office, and I'm joined today by Jan McKee, one of our counselors, who works actually out of Richmond, Virginia, does internet counseling and services over the internet, and she has really come up with this topic, and because it's really been important to her. It's important to us in Above and Beyond, and the title of it, if you like, is 4 Common Open Doors for Demonic Torment During Childhood. We spend a lot of time, of course, and a lot of our articles have talked about deliverance ministry, about open doors. Demons can't jump on a person. They need to come in through an open door. But as you might expect, childhood is pretty formative years for people. And quite honestly, we get a lot of people in here who bring their children in. Yeah. Right, Jan? We've seen that happen, to come in for deliverance and for counseling. And so we just, as you say, it's kind of an overview we're going to look at with some of these elements we've covered in other podcasts, but we thought it'd be nice to kind of tie them all together, at least as a starting point to bring understanding. I'm not going to, there isn't a lot, 1, 2, 3 little steps to take at the end of it, how to fix all this, but at least it starts with revelation of understanding. There's what's going on in my life, what's going on in my children's life, maybe my child's life, and these are things we've kind of gleaned from literally meeting with thousands of people over the years and meeting with adults, and find out a lot of their issues started in childhood, and even with parents, as they say, who bring their children in. And so that's why we're doing it. Maybe if you, as a parent listening to this, it will help you. Maybe if you see things in your children that are manifesting even at a young age, and or you're an adult and you know new things were kind of messed up in your childhood, this might give you insight to understand that it is that what happened there could have been an open door for demonic torment. And that's kind of a good starting point, right, Jan? We talk about open doors. Demons just can't jump on a person of any age. They need an entry point, an open door, right? Right.
The legal rights.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what we're going to talk about, some of these common open doors today. So, what's one of the scriptures that we talk about, or even the children, is Proverbs 22:6, right?
Right. I feel like what's lacking, and the reason I wanted to do this topic is what's lacking sometimes with parents today is kind of more of an intentionality in training up, like Proverbs 22:6 says, train your children in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. And many of you have heard that scripture, but how intentional are we in making sure that our kids have spiritual well-being, and they're set up for, healthy adult lives spiritually, starting in their childhood.
Yeah, it's laid down there, and as we all know, there's so many broken homes out there now. Parents aren't, both parents aren't around. Sometimes there's no parents around, and so I think everybody intuitively understands that what happens is children, whether you're a Christian or an atheist or whatever, that what happens during our childhood years is
And I know a lot
crucial.
of single moms, and they're wonderful, but we all, single moms or, married couples with children, we just need to be reminded that there's an intentionality we need to have, and that's what Proverbs 22:6 talks about.
Yeah, training, and that whole thing is training up with a child. And, people think about training. Well, that covers a lot of things. There's potty training, there's training for this, how to, be good in kindergarten, but the elements of the spiritual training, a lot of that's really, it's missing, right? The kids
and it doesn't end with just taking them to church. Like a lot of us get that part, right? We know, and we start, when our kids are old enough to either go to Sunday school, or join their parents in church. We wait until we think they're, going to be able to come, and we make an effort with that. But that oftentimes is where it stops.
Right, exactly. And there's no such thing as perfect parents. I mean, we made more than our share of mistakes. We both have children, and it's look back and say, "Oh wow, Lord,"
coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda. So that's
Right.
not the thing. But there are just a lot of things that happen that are that, and some of them are, and that's what we're going to talk about. Some of them are more obvious than others, and a lot of it, our culture has been blinded to some of these things, and
Right.
we're going to talk about that. So it's important for parents, right? I think most people intuitively understand that, especially as a Christian parent, that there's that if just getting the grasp of, or Paul says in Ephesians, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, against these powers, these spiritual forces of evil, and even in deliverance, of course, is the driving out of demons, and there's not demons behind every problem in a person's life. We do a lot of counseling, and people need counseling, but you can't counsel demons out of people. And the fact that gets lost is that a lot of the stuff that we do or done to us, even as children, can be open doors for demons to enter in. And it says, well, that's not fair. It doesn't sound fair. Why a child, doesn't choose a lot of these things. And
there is a spiritual battle out there for the souls of your kids. And we need to start early, helping equip them for that battle.
Yeah, and what we insist on here, and I use the word insist, and it's the right word, and above and beyond, is before we minister to somebody's children, we minister to the parents first.
Right.
We especially if it's deliverance. Some people come in, and most parents, if they get deliverance or are not familiar with deliverance and believe in it, or they'll come in here and they're more than willing, say, because the parents, right, are the spiritual covering for the home, and they can. And yes, as children get older, they make their own choices and their own decisions, but there is a spiritual covering, and if the covering is needs some is not right, then
right. And then the early childhood developmental years are especially vulnerable years in terms of formation of a child's ability to think critically, to challenge their thoughts. They don't have that yet, and the enemy knows that. And so they're a particularly vulnerable target. Satan knows if he gets your children, he gets your future.
Right, exactly. So, all right, well, let's, so that's the context of what we're going to talk about, the common, and we're just going to pick 4. There's others, it's not the definitive list, but things that we see as most common entry points, if you like, for demonic torment in children. How as we talked about, devil just can't jump on a person. They need an entry point, an open door. And the first one that we're going to start with, and it's really, I think we see it as the most significant one in people's lives, is this whole realm of generational curses.
Right.
And so,
and it's why you pointed out that often we need to start with the parents, going through a deliverance process if they haven't already.
Yes.
And then deal with the children.
And you said it, we've done a lot of these podcasts on generational curses. We talked a lot about some in different ethnic groups. So we're not going to go through all that again. I encourage you to do the research out there in deliveranceministry.fm on iTunes or on our website. Look for podcasts we've done them for ethnic curse, for African Americans, for Hispanics, German, English, different Hispanic generation ethnic groups, but just generational curses in general, a lot, and we believe the single biggest open door that people have. And sometimes people have come in, or they were adopted, or they'll bring their adopted children in, and so it's huge. And once again, we're not going to talk about that one today because we've talked a lot about it before, but that's a huge one. And part of our provision and teaching is that Jesus became a curse for us, so the curses are broken, but the spirits can still be active in a person's life. Just because a person gets saved, gets born again, speaking in tongues, doing all the things, it doesn't matter. The spirits can still be there.
Right.
They can, and they need to get kicked out, and so that's huge.
Right. And
so that's why, as you emphasize what you said, Jen, is that before we'll deal with the kids, is like, well, we need to deal with the parents and deal with them first, not only for their own benefit as spiritual leaders, but also going forward that they can help with their children. So that's huge. Cannot overemphasize the importance of generational curses and the importance.
Well, and I guess the only other point I would make with that is that we know that, for instance, alcoholism can get passed down. Even genetically, scientists have been able to identify how that happens. But now there's a new study of science called epigenetics. Excuse me, that's a mouthful.
It is.
That these genes they will express from generation to generation, but there has to be a trigger to switch them on. So just because your father was an alcoholic doesn't mean you're going to be an alcoholic. But if your father was an alcoholic and you have some kind of trauma or other open door, then oftentimes you're going to be more vulnerable to develop alcoholism as an addiction problem. So again, that just goes to the importance of this topic and how parents can really be aware and intentional in training up their children.
Yeah, it's just a linkage. And once again, even though we're in spiritual warfare and we're in deliverance ministry, there's a linkage between the things in the spirit realm and the body. So all this stuff in genetics, some people poo-poo it. I mean, the humanists would say, well, it's all genetics. So it's like, well, no, we see the linkage there, and we're not going to discount that, what the science comes up with.
Right.
You know, there are other elements of it, but we can see that that could be manifested.
Science is just catching up with the Bible.
Right, in the science, and there could be those things, but, at the core, let's say it comes back to the point is, and people can bear witness. They can have parents who are alcoholics, but if you have 8 kids, that doesn't all necessarily mean that they all become alcoholics, and so they can be free. But spiritually, the Bible, we come back to that Jesus became a curse for us. Right. Curses are broken.
Hallelujah. Right.
And deal with that.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. All right. The second most common open door that we see in even in adults and certainly in children is this whole realm of what we would just call abandonment. The child's been abandoned. Either the parents are not there physically, maybe divorce or death or adoption, but it can also include the parent being there physically but not being there for them emotionally, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a friend who witnessed her sister being hit by a car at the age of, I believe it was 5. And her parents were, of course, overcome with grief. And she experienced, my friend did, a real sense of abandonment in the midst of all of that. And it had far-reaching consequences.
So they just kind of left her alone. It affected her parents' ability to take care of her.
Or to help her grieve, or to help her process what had happened and help her recover from the trauma of that. She actually was right there standing with her sister when it happened. So, yeah.
And that's that ties into the next one. We're going to do the open door. The trauma it can be another open door, but in her case, just we see many people who are abandoned, and they're not there. Their parents aren't there. And, that's a real sense of it. Or somebody who's adopted, that's just, an open door for a spirit of rejection to be upon that child, and
insecurity.
Yeah, it opens the door for so many other things. But rejection, now we said it before, rejection, we see that in so many people. It's just so easy, I believe, for the devils to bring rejection upon a person. And because, the parent might not be there.
Right.
Or they might be there physically, but they're not there.
Right.
And they're perceived, or even there's 3 parent kids in the family, and one child's the favorite. They let mom and so that's a huge one, and just really perceiving that, and we've just seen that a lot where, once again, there's a lot of open doors and a lot of things that we see people do to themselves and sin that they bring on. But this whole realm, I think, of abandonment, feeling abandoned. Is a huge open door. Right,
for fear also.
Yep. Anything, rejection, and like you say, it can open rejection, fear, and get more of that. It'll grow and open. You get into addictions and all these other things to bring comfort.
Parents were designed to be an emotional safety net for kids. Yeah. Exactly.
So the biggest single open door is the generational curses.
Right.
And then we see the abandonment and rejection there. And in a few minutes, we're going to get through this list first, and then we're going to just kind of talk, okay, I'm hearing this. There's no good news here. How do we deal with that? Well, just bear with us. Let's get through these entry points first. So generational curses, this sense of abandonment. And I think, on some level, nobody had perfect parents. So sometimes people use that as an excuse. Oh, my mom didn't love me, or my dad was never there. And it can't be, it's... sometimes there are excuses for people. Sometimes there are reasons, and it's like trying to discern that is part of our job and part of things we try to do.
We just need to take stock of that and then move forward.
Yeah, what do we do with that going forward? And we'll talk about that. But it's a real issue. And I think the thing to understand is more than just, and once again, we were hitting this hard because I think it's the thing that gets left out is these are entry points or open doors for demons to enter into us. This is the most, it can cause emotional damage and this and that. The secular world and secular counselors will agree with everything we're saying.
Right.
Things in the bloodline and abandonment, rejection. I mean, that's not revelatory,
and the medical community too.
And they'll all agree with that.
Right.
But the element that I think that the Christians that we need to be aware of is this whole realm of deliverance ministry is that can actually be an open door to the way we deal with this abandonment. Can be an open door for demonic spirits to enter into us. And that's where in the realm of deliverance is important, because as we talk about, you can't counsel demons out of people, but they need to get driven up. But how do they get there? What are the open doors? And then dealing with those open doors.
Maybe another word for open doors too would be permission, right? It's permission for the enemy.
Yeah, or entry points.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's different phrases, and we use, exactly. They got to come in. They just can't, and we use that to counter the fact they just can't jump on people. Because we talked about some people, and that's the whole realm of going to movies. I don't want to pray for somebody because their demons might jump on me, or it's like no, it doesn't. They can't catch. You can't catch demons like you catch a virus from somebody. But that's a big one. The third one you kind of touched on a little bit, but I think maybe we can expand on that a little bit. But is the whole realm of abuse and trauma. People who are victims of abuse, and I mean, typically these are ongoing things: verbal, mental, emotional, physical abuse. Certainly, sexual abuse is one, but also, and it's a separate, is this whole realm of trauma, where they witness or experience a traumatic event. Now, we're going to explain in a moment as we go here how or why those are open doors. But what about the abuse, or what about the trauma? Maybe
trauma. Well, I mean, I guess the best way to is to refer back to my example of my friend I was telling you about, who watched her sister being hit by a car. That is by definition a trauma.
Yeah,
that would fall into that category, right?
Or somebody dying, anybody dying in front of you, or being lost, or some sort of traumatic event. Yep.
And what that led to for her was a need to find some source of comfort since her parents weren't there. And
so it was two together. She had the abandonment. The trauma was bad enough.
Right. It was a double whammy.
It was a double whammy. Yeah. Because her parents were affected too.
Right.
They were affected too by the death of their child.
Mm-hmm. And so that opened the door for, like I said, the enemy always tries to come up with counterfeits for everything. So a counterfeit way for her to find comfort began
to deal with the trauma.
Began with masturbation in childhood, which led to pornography, which led to a full-blown sexual addiction. Yeah. And which could have been life-threatening, because the sexual addiction looked like meeting up with strangers, that were met on the internet initially, and then meeting up with them, somewhere actually in a physical address. So it could have been a life or death situation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one, either one is bad. I mean, the rejection, a lot of people, we've seen the same thing, enter down similar paths in terms of looking for love, the abandonment and seeking that acceptance of love in the wrong places. But the trauma, I don't know. I mean, this is people ask, well, how does the trauma work? And I just think, and I don't know this, there's no real scriptures to point to that I know of, or that we have at this point, but I think people, sometimes our natural defenses just get overwhelmed. Something happens that's so traumatic, like her sister, seeing her sister died. I mean, that's just like an emotional, a mental, an overload or something. Right. It's like because everybody has natural defenses. We can think, we can take thoughts, I'm not going to do this, and, water off a duck's back. We've heard all those expressions we have, and those they're effective on some level, because God is given that to everybody. And I think sometimes some of these things, everything just gets overwhelmed. It's like the circuits that gets overloaded.
Well,
and that can be an open door.
The Bible says, if as a man thinketh, so is he. So when we're overwhelmed with traumatic thoughts, those have to go somewhere. They got to be processed. And when emotion is involved, it gets, it's almost has the effect of searing it on our thoughts, even more so, right? Sealing it or searing it. Just think of burning it, a memory onto your mind. Yep.
And our thinking, and our natural defenses, that we start thinking the wrong things, things just go haywire. It's like something gets burned out. Our normal natural thinking things, defenses don't work as well. And so we get overwhelmed. And so And in some way, that's an open door for spirits to come upon us. We've seen that sometimes people traumatized. I believe that's how demonic spirits, or personality spirits enter. Somebody's ritually abused. They even invoke the saying, "I wish this was happening to somebody else," or "I wish I was somewhere else." And that act of detaching or disassociating with that can be an open door for spirits to enter. They're being tormented, so somebody else is literally taking the abuse, and so those are traumatic things too. And
to kind of finish up the testimony of my friend, she went through deliverance, which was really was a life-changing event for her, and then she was able to deal with the mechanism, the stronghold, if you will, of thinking that was propping up the addiction. And she was finally able to make headway in beating the addiction after going through deliverance. So that looked like, at first, a very intentional, process of taking thoughts captive and beating the temptation that would come. But as she did that over time, she was able to gain victory over it, and I'm happy to report that she is free and serving in ministry and glorifying God with her life. So that's what overcoming can look like. Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to be. That's such an awesome testimony. And in her case, it was kind of, it sounded like almost like a 2-stage or a process approach. She got some measure of freedom in the I guess the abandonment issue first, and then and that we see that a lot. It's not always just one bang and all the demons are gone and you're fixed and healed. Sometimes people get a wonderful deliverance one time, but sometimes it can be like more of a process approach.
Yeah,
right?
well, she wasn't able to fight the addiction at all until she went through deliverance. So once she went through deliverance, it was like a switch was flipped, and then she was able to beat the addiction.
Awesome.
So
awesome. Yeah. That's good. And I think the core is as part of the process of getting prepared. However, she went through that, she closed the doors on those things and forgave and did it, and then got the spirits out. Yeah, that's huge. So. That definitely one of the fruits. So we've got generational curses, and once again, those are things you can't control or deal with because we didn't do those things, but we can, even though they came down through the bloodline, they can still be dealt with. The other one is how to deal with the issues of abandonment, and a lot of, as you might imagine, forgiveness is a huge, element of closing the door there, and abuse and trauma. That's another huge open door. And the fourth, and another major area we see is in the whole realm of for children even at an early age getting involved in the cultic things, right? Things, some of it's pretty innocuous, and even in the body of Christ, people disagree on this. Things like Harry Potter or Pokemon. I mean, I've seen these little Pokemon things at church they'll have for kids, right? And it's it's just
horoscopes
sad.
and
it's just so sad. But we've seen it. We've ministered to people. I had a young man come down. He was 15 or 16, flew down from Canada one time, and man, he was tormented. He'd been involved in video games and things. His parents left him in his room. He had kind of a learning, I think, issues of some kind his parents were having in his room, but he got involved in video games and music, and he was demonized.
Yeah, it can be a dark world on the video games.
Yeah, that's huge for kids, and so
I had a client who was given a Ouija board for Christmas one year as a child.
Well, in a certain generation, we all were.
Right.
I was I got a few years on you, but I can tell you, when I was a kid, I can tell you back in my time, every kid got a Ouija board. Yeah. It's just like that was the thing, and puddle, and of course, I don't think anything for us ever came of it because we just puddled around with it a couple of times, but whatever.
You never know.
You never know. No, I agree.
Is it worth the chance? Yeah.
No, I agree, but we didn't know. My parents weren't Christians; they didn't know. It was just the game of the year, and so. Yep. But people discount that. It's all the video games. I mean, they're horrific. There's some of the ones out there that delve in the spirit. I mean, look, we've got other podcasts, other videos, other articles that talked about that. Dr. Phil has done a lot of these things, and we've got those out there. Once again, you can find them on our web and our resource library. I'm looking at things for kids, but just know that. And it's like, without a revelation, the people perish. And I think if the parents just continue, it's not a big deal, that's going to be a problem. But we've seen it as counselors and deliverance ministers that it is a problem. The things that, and it can, be an open door. And I don't even, even for, I think these things can happen, even things that's happened to them as kids, and years ago, right? And the things they were involved in, music wise and cultic wise, can be affecting them
Right.
this generation even is.
Right. It shapes even their worldview. Yeah.
Yep.
And what they're going to open themselves up to.
So those are the, once again, we're just kind of giving you a high level flyby of some things, and hopefully it'll trigger some thoughts of you. If you're an adult sitting out there and, said, man, this kind of happened in my past, and then, it might be things that it might give you some understanding of areas you might need help with, either in terms of counseling or deliverance. But if you're a parent, and you got a child now listening to this, it's like, man, if you, these are issues to be dealt with. So,
well, and if you're an adult, I wouldn't underestimate that the things that happened in your childhood are still impacting you. Sometimes we'll diminish in our mind. Oh, well, that wasn't a big deal. I was bullied. So was a lot of people.
On,
yeah. But don't diminish its impact on your life. And if you're going through current struggles as an adult, it very well could be that the foundation for those struggles was laid in your childhood.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so either way, I mean, if you need help, you need help, right? You get counseling, get healed, get delivered. Hopefully, it's, there's lots of things out there. If you just accept the fact that you are, as a parent, you really, do the best you can. There's resources out there to help set the tone and the spiritual atmosphere in your home, right?
Right. So, we need to first, as parents, be walking in spiritual wholeness ourselves. Your children's best hope for being spiritually whole and well is for you to be, obviously. And then, setting the tone in your home. Church is not an option. It's not just something that gets added to your to-do list. It should be the center. We should have a Christ-centered calendar, a Christ-centered focus for our family and the decisions we make. And we need to be intentional with that. And then also just be intentional with educating our children about the Christian worldview, about their identity in Christ. And because I guarantee you the culture will come against that.
Yeah, and if you're out there and you haven't done it, just start where you are. Just start where you are. It's just, it's that scripture, train a child up in the way they should go. When they get old, they'll not depart. I mean, you just pour stuff into them, and, at some point, I believe by faith, the child's going to come back. So start where you are. Yes, it takes some courage, some changes. Yes, and if you're a one parent in a 2-parent house and the other partner, the spouse, is not in agreement, then you got a challenge. We're not going to try to discount that. And but it's like, and you pray for the Lord's guidance and Lord's help on how you can begin to do that moving forward. So it's, again, this isn't one of these, these 1, 2, 3 things, and just do this and it's fixed. It's like, no, but if you can grasp the significance of it and believe that, then the Lord, you start with that and say, okay, Lord, I know where I want to go. How do I get there from here? Right. And I think, pray for that, and he will definitely help him with that.
He's faithful.
All right. Once again, I think you've talked about it, right? The earlier we can start, the better. That's the ideal thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that's. I hope just kind of a different kind of flow on this one. Like I said, we just wanted to give you a synopsis of some of the areas we see here as Christian counselors and deliverance ministers, and just pray on it, chew on it. Contact us. We do counseling and deliverance worldwide over the internet. Of course, in our offices here in Florida. And if get help somewhere. If you see these issues, get some help and go back to these things in your childhood and get them dealt with. Because as Jan said, they don't typically just go away. Sometimes people sweep things under the rug, but you sweep things under the rug, you get a lumpy rug. But you try to do things that and spiritually, it oftentimes it doesn't get dealt with. And unfortunately, because of the Word of God and the power of God, it can be dealt with. Right. And sometimes you can deal with these things on your own. You just doing. I'm not trying to, but start with.
And
that.
I don't think we as parents need to be fearful, in the face of the culture and the things coming against our kids, because God gave us power and authority. He gave us promises in His Word, and we just need to walk in those things. We need to appropriate them in our lives, in our families. Yep, absolutely.
That's those are foundational for sure. Hope you enjoyed it. This podcast, this session today, as I say, I'd love to hear from you, especially topics and suggestions for us. We want to do things that are relevant for you. We're on iTunes, deliveranceministry.fm. All these podcasts as well are on our A&B Counseling, above and beyond Christian Counseling.com, which is andbcounseling.com is the website name. Sign up for our resource library, free resources, a lot of our articles, podcasts. YouTube, we have just recently passed 15,000 viewers on YouTube, and we're excited about that. We don't advertise. There's a lot of good content there. Subscribe to that podcast. We got the articles and the resource library. You have access to all of that totally for free. Consider becoming a warrior partner with us. You'll see that information on the website where you can contribute one time or monthly to what we do here to help expand our offerings and our visibility in terms of deliverance ministry and spiritual warfare. So would prayerfully consider that. So with that, Jan, thank you for this. That was good. Good topic coming up with this. And we'll be back again with you real soon. God bless you.
God bless you.